Welcome, everyone, to the Resilient Minds podcast. I'm super grateful and blessed to be welcoming Dave Dodson onto the show. Welcome, brother. Good to see you.
Oh, I'm excited. I've been looking forward to it for a long time. Thanks, Eric.
Yeah, thank you. And for those that don't know, I really just want to acknowledge the beauty of the book that you've really brought to life, The Manager's Handbook. This book, brings and blends this tactical wisdom of really knowing how to integrate really powerful managerial leadership skills into the workforce. But also, I think that there's a lot of magic that you emphasize of really curating that in terms of everyday life. So I just wanted to really thank you for bringing this wisdom to life through your book and in the way that you choose to operate.
I really appreciate that, Eric, because the book was a labor of love. It's a subject matter that I care a lot about,
Yeah.
and it was an accidental book, and I started curating information and things that I had talked about with other people, advice I had been given, advice I had given out, and all of a sudden I looked around. I said, I have like the makings of a book here that could really help people. And
Mm.
I'll get emails or text messages or LinkedIn messages of someone who's saying that they read the book and as a result, fill in the blank. And it's
Yeah.
just so heartwarming for me to read. And one thing is that I'm trying really, really hard to get this book into community college programs too, because
Mm.
there's so much about the basics of management that is so learnable and helps your career and is not available to a lot of people. And that's one of the things I love about entrepreneurship is that it's one of those career paths that is so much more available to most people than other career paths.
I always find that entrepreneurship is like this beautiful risk-taking experience of being creative and learning how to mold it with our
Mm.
communication acumen, but then also super important to listen.
Yeah,
You
for
know,
sure.
I think there's this blend. So for those that don't know you, I'm just gonna share a little brief description about your background and the importance of what you've cultivated up until now. So for again, David is on the Stanford University's Graduate School of Business faculty, where he guides students in tactical execution. He teaches one of the most sought after courses at Stanford. And in 2023, the economics listed his course as one of the three hottest courses at Stanford, which is exciting, So he recently received the MSX Teaching Excellence Award and is a six-time speaker in the graduation last lecture series and holds an economics and business degree from Stanford. So is this Stanford is kind of like the home base, it's been a place for you where you've allowed yourself to grow and then also give back. This is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, so I grew up in rural Colorado,
Yeah.
uh, where I grew up. There's more people than now than there were when I was there. When I was there, it was nothing, and everybody was sort of divided between farmers and ranchers. I was on the farmer side because my dad was in the farm equipment business, and when I applied, because you mentioned the Stanfords, it just reminded me of the story. I applied to Stanford because there was this business person that I admired who had the Coors, the beer, the Coors distributorship. And he
Hmm.
had a big house and drove a nice car. And I saw him one day jogging and he had a Stanford t-shirt on. That's literally, I saw that. I go, okay, well, I want to go to Stanford because I want to be like him.
Yeah.
And when I filled out the application, this is back when you typed it out, I did not even know what state Stanford University was located in. I just wanted to go to that school. And so I arrived there, Eric, and I had a, you know, Western hat on. I was wearing boots, chewing tobacco in the side of my mouth. And I arrived at this fancy California school. And, a lot of people are being driven up from Southern California and their parents' Mercedes and stuff like that. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. My jaw was like dropping down. But it was a great growing up experience. But I left Stanford and then I had a career in entrepreneurship. So the middle of my career was running companies. And of course, now I've got this ability to be able to take my experience of actually running a company and being an entrepreneur and teaching at Stanford, which is not when you teach a course, you don't just sort of stand up and talk about war stories. You have to learn how to convey material in a way that your students will learn.
Mhm.
And so I've been able to learn over the last dozen years how to convey this information about how do you hire, how do you run a meeting, how do you delegate, how do you measure quality. I've learned how to convey that to students and marry that with my own personal practical experience. It's been really fun. I'm Eric. I feel so blessed. I wish I could say that I had this perfectly choreographed, strategic life plan, but I didn't. It just kind of unfolded in this accidental, wonderful way.
Interesting. I love it. So you actually didn't know everything. You almost it's like it's so funny because we learn from these amazing books and we think about the authors behind the books and we're like, wow, they really have it all figured out. You, you know, and it's I think it's so fascinating because
Yeah.
this role model, like, and so many people to your point, you observed the gentleman running, right? Yeah, he had the Stanford, kind of identity, and you role modeled that to say, hey, I want to really step into that as well. I have this curiosity, this need, this desire to want to learn more. And then from that place, you started to discover more parts of yourself where now you're also being that role model for others with the book. So I love how you were able to really recognize that. And it's interesting because, it's easier, like I think, it's easier to connect the dots looking backwards than it is moving forwards.
Oh, yeah.
And is it possible that the more that we start to relax and be present in that area of, we're able to then lead from that place of certainty. So this is where I kind of wanted to blend that learning and sharing of that practical information, because you're practically doing it inside of organizations, but you're also then teaching it. So, which is really beautiful because you're not it's like Tony Robbins, he says, I prefer to learn from the few that do than the many that talk. And
Mm.
you are a practical, tactical teacher that is not only just doing it, but you're also teaching it. So you bridge that as well, just like Tony does. So I'd love if you can share a little bit about the insight of like your experiences of what allowed you to start to define this trusting role model of self, of what's within you, to then be able to show up in these meetings, in these circumstances, and to lead from that place of certainty that now you've been able to then also deliver inside of Stanford, but also within your book. Do you mind?
Yeah. No, not at all. And if Eric, if I start answering this and it's a little bit off of what you wanted to talk about, just go like this and
Yeah.
redirect me. But it's interesting. Yeah, first of all, I don't want to pretend that I just sort of had no life direction. You talk about connecting the dots. So, as my career unfolded, I did pay attention. I did know that if I study hard, I might get into that same school that Coors guy was in. And
Yeah.
if I got good grades, I might be able to get into graduate school. And if I paid attention and learned and hung around with smart people, I'd have mentorship that I could be an entrepreneur. So there was a certain amount of intentionality in there, which reminds me of I try to meditate every morning. And one of the things I've learned from the meditation is this confluence of intention and attention. So, like, you have the intention, meaning this is where I would like to take my life, or this is where I envision myself. And then there's attention, meaning I'm going to actually do things. There's going to be activity around that. Which brings me to the book, which is that the book focuses on the attention part of it. And um, as I was observing both my own career, but make no mistake, the book, The Manager's Handbook, which is the name of the book, The Manager's Handbook, is not a victory lap about, hey, look at all the great things that I did as a manager. And I was successful as a CEO. I don't want to downplay that, but it was not a victory lap that sometimes you get with these business books, when retiring CEOs. I was actually deeply curious about why some people were more successful than others. And so I viewed my background as having been a CEO and teaching as a platform to research. And I came
Mhm.
up with these 5 skill areas. But what was so exciting to me, and what truly led me to say I need to write a book about this, is that I realized that these skill areas were not excuse me, that the people that were the most successful were not people that were born a certain way or looked a certain way or had these certain attributes at birth, like they were really great speakers or whatever. There were some dull people and some exciting people and some tall people and some short people. They were people who focused on the attention part of it and said, I'm going to learn these skills because this is where I want to get to. I'm in an area of investing called search funds, where we basically it's where MBAs generally, or people out of school, they will raise a certain amount of money and they'll go buy a company from a retiring owner. And there's a certain ethos around this, and it's very skill based, skills that anybody can learn. But here's the point of it, is that if you look at the demographics of people who enter entrepreneurship through this path, whether it's people of color, whether it's women, that it blows away any other numbers in entrepreneurship. And so one of the things I'm really proud of is that we've like blown open the doors for entrepreneurship and management of people who might have been hesitant to enter, because we've said, no, if you learn these 5 skills, you will succeed. And I feel very strongly about that. But you have to be willing to learn the skills. You have to be willing to do the hard work. You can't just look in the mirror and go, hey, I look like an entrepreneur. I look like I'm going to be successful, so therefore I am. No athlete gets there that way.
Tell us about the 5 skills. Let's go deeper into those 5 skills, because I think that this is now focusing on the book. And I really think that, like, if I may, your book is really what is that word? Magnus opus? It's like it's a beautiful work of art. And I think that a lot of people can really learn how to apply these practical wisdom, especially because of the fact that you've built companies, you've emphasized organizations, you've invested, like you said, into these acquisitions, and you've been able to build teams that also then delegate and allow you to be a real true owner, not an operator. So what are these 5 skills that are really important for anybody that may not be aware of the book or is curious about the book and
Right.
wants to know more?
Okay. So the book is structured in 5 parts. Now I'm going to come quickly back to the 5 parts, but I want to say that each chapter so there's 5 parts, and within each part, there's a number of chapters. And those chapters are a specific skill area. Each chapter is written in as few words as possible, because the person who wants to read my book is busy. They don't have time to read long stories and stuff. So it's very economically written. And at the end of each chapter, there's a short summary that basically, as if you were taking notes from the chapter. So I'm trying to make this book, it's called The Manager's Handbook for a reason. I wanted it to be a handbook. I wanted to be the book that sat on someone's desk that they referred back to all the time. Not, it was a great business beach read, and now I'm going to go back to doing what I'm doing before. Because I wanted the book to be, I told my wife, Wendy, I said, I want this to be a book that's used, not a book that's read. Okay, yeah. So the 5 parts are the ability to build a team, the ability to set and take advice, to seek and take advice, the ability to set and adhere to priorities, fanatical custodian of time, and an obsession with quality. Every single leader that I saw, whether it was Steve Jobs or the guy running the local lumber store that was successful, every single person had those 5 characteristics. By the way, I've been making the mistake, actually, in this podcast of referring frequently to entrepreneurship. But these are true whether you're a middle manager, just getting started. These are all the same skills. So and then each part is broken down. So, for example, building a team, how do you hire? Well, you don't hire by walking in there and reading the resume as you're walking through the door and chatting with somebody. Okay, that's a poor way to hire people. How do you onboard people? How do you give people feedback? How do you handle people who are struggling and may not be able to survive? 360 reviews, exit interviews, and how you let people go. So if this were, I'm not a golfer, I've tried to golf, but I'm horrible at it. But it's a good way to describe it. If I were to learn to golf, and let's say that you're my instructor, you wouldn't hand me some clubs and a ball and say, okay, go put the ball in the hole. The hole's down there by the flag. You say, okay, today we're going to talk about how to hold a golf club.
Yeah.
And once you master that, tomorrow we're going to tell you where your feet should be. And then I'm going to tell you what the different clubs do. You break it down into these individual steps. But if you learn all those individual steps, I call them the sub skills, then the master skill is learned. So that's the way the book is broken out. And the reason why the book's been successful, why I was on the Wall Street Journal bestseller list, and why I have heard the things that you've been saying about the book, is that people go, oh my God, like I finally have somebody who's just going to like tell me how to do it. I don't want
Yeah.
to read about these great people that I'll never be. I want to learn how to do it. And that's what the manager's handbook is all about.
These skills, these sub skills, especially the reviews and the hiring, and I hear a lot of like communication being very much as we read, it's and I told you we're in like a book club that we are actually reading this book right now. I'm excited to get into some of those specificities. However, it's really communication. This is what I'm noticing in a lot of the book is there's a lot of like key integrations of being curious, and which you, by the way, bring this to life of hey, the book is about this attention of being deeply curious. And if we start recognizing that as leaders, that our position point as a CEO is to be this platform of research, to be the person that is actually the most curious in the room, that's where we discover and master the sub skills of what our collective team or organization looks like. So when it comes to building this rapport and mastering these sub skills, what have you found? And again, we can refer back to the book, but I'd love to hear it from you
Yeah.
specifically. Is like, what have you mastered? Why was this curiosity so inherent within you to want to then also do that practically, do that professionally in terms of like within your organizations, then merge that within the schooling, and then now put it into this book? What was your why?
Yeah. Well, I think it probably goes back to the earlier story, Eric, I was saying about growing up. So, my dad, I said he was in the farm equipment business. He had a company that manufactured farm equipment. And for our little, corner of the world, it's a pretty decent sized company. He had 100 or 150 employees at its peak and did well. Well, some things changed with government farm subsidy policy. At the time, the interest rates spiked, and effectively the company went out of business. Well, it went out of business, effectively went bankrupt, but it went out of business. But he was determined to make sure he paid off all his debts before he had to close it down. And it was really a sad ending to his entrepreneurial career. At the same time, my grandfather um, was in the coal mining business. He had a coal mine in the Appalachia that was the wrong kind of coal. It was soft coal that burned at a lower temperature, and it was replaced by all the hard coal that is found now in Wyoming. So all those coal mines got shut down. So oddly enough, like my role models were actually entrepreneurs who hadn't been successful. And I think that instilled in me this kind of like two things. The first, like, why didn't I just then decide to go be a doctor or a lawyer, right? I mean, it doesn't make any sense that you would do that. But I still looked at my dad and my granddad. I was like, I want to be them. I want to build something. When I would see him, he and I would walk out to the factory floor and people would say, hello, Mr. Dodson or whatever. Um, and that wasn't a power thing. I just thought this idea about you're like getting all these people together to build something, to do something. It's all I wanted to do. But at the same time, I noticed that some people were just better at it than others. And so, where the obsession or the drive is like, why are some people who are handed exactly the same opportunity, they succeed and others don't? So I want to give you an example. And I'm going to give you like a star-studded example because first of all, everyone can relate to it. And it's kind of an interesting story. Let's take Amazon and Jeff Bezos, right? What most people don't realize is that Jeff Bezos did not invent the idea of selling online. That was done several years before. Second, he did not invent the technology used for online commerce. That plumbing and all of that had already been created. He just copied that. Third, most interesting, he didn't invent the idea or come up with the idea of selling books online. There was called a company called Books Galore that had about a 2-year head start on him on selling books online. And then, to make matters more remarkable, within 18 months after launching Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Border, and Walden Books all came out with selling books online. Okay. So now imagine that he invented nothing. He came up with nothing. He had no technology advantage. He had no first mover advantage. And he was surrounded with people who had a huge advantage. They had lower cost of goods. They had brands that people knew, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, of course, we all know how that ended. He clobbered them all, right? He clobbered them all because he was just better than them at getting things done. And that is like my obsession. And that's why I wrote the book, The Manager's Handbook, is like, how do these people step in? Sam Walton, he didn't invent department stores, right? All right. And he annihilated J.C. Penney, Kmart, Target, he annihilated them because he was just better at getting things done. People look at Steve Jobs, they don't realize he didn't invent the PC, he didn't invent the mouse, he didn't invent the interface, he didn't invent the internet. He didn't do any of that. He was just better at getting things done. And Steve Jobs, you go, well, Dodson wrote this book called The Manager's Handbook that talks about implementation, but probably there's no person that I reference more than Steve Jobs, who everybody thinks he succeeded because he had a red cape and had X-ray vision, but he didn't. He was extraordinarily good at attracting and retaining talent. He surrounded himself with such smart, great people, and he kept them. And also, he's the king of someone who would set and adhere to priorities, like a laser beam. I'm just giving you two, and those are 2 of the 5 parts in the book. So this idea that people win because they saw things that other people didn't see, or they're just like not like us, and I could never be like them, is completely false. And that's what gets me up in the morning, and that's why I wrote The Manager's Handbook.
I just want to really emphasize the brilliance in being able to see these patterns, because this is ultimately pattern recognition that you're emphasizing, is that everyone is able to recognize patterns so that we can utilize them and create new ones by it's like even Bill Gates, for example, he didn't, he was able to see a pattern, he was able to come together. Like, these are all people that we're able to captivate and cultivate patterns and then lead from a place of direction, where now it comes into this delegation component. So attracting and retaining became their gift of seeing a bigger purpose, a bigger vision, a bigger responsibility, and moving towards seeing that through by being able to communicate that effectively to a global standard. And so
Hey,
you
can I
talk
say one thing, Eric, about the
please,
communication?
please,
Yeah.
please, please.
So, uh, you know, it would be of no use to my students or my readers or companies that I'm invested in to say, be better at communication, right? I mean, like, what do I do with that, David?
Right.
And yet communication is a really important part of, I'm just going to pick one example, which is a chapter in the book on how you give people feedback, which is critical to bringing out the very best of the people that you work with, right? So instead of just saying, hey, it's really important to give good feedback and make sure they really understand and make sure you're clear and then go to the next chapter, I say, this is how you give feedback. And I break it into 6 parts, 6 very, very simple parts, so that when you're giving feedback, it's conversational, but you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and you just gave phenomenal, like top decile feedback. And the same thing with when you're calling up someone for advice. The order that you start with, this is the problem that I'm trying to solve, or the opportunity that I want to take advantage of, et cetera, et cetera. So I break communication down into also paint by numbers approach, so that when you are talking with an employee or you are talking with an advisor, you are maximizing the value of that interaction.
When this value of that interaction happens and there's a disagreement in that feedback, what's the importance of being thoughtful in that disagreement for you?
Yeah. Well, there's that notion of being, listening with curiosity and making sure, one of the things that's most important is people want to be heard. And so the 5th step there, or excuse me, the 3rd step is you say, what are the objections, or what are the obstacles? Sorry, not objections. What are the obstacles you have in place? So let's say let's say that you work for me, okay? And you're coming in late for work. I'm picking up like a really simple example to illustrate it. I wouldn't say, Eric, you got to come to work and you have to be here on time for your shift or you're going to be fired. You got it? You could do that, but I'm missing an important one of the missing components, which is what is getting in the way of you coming to work on time? Because it
Mm.
could be that you have a special need child and your wife is working, and on Tuesdays and Thursdays, it's chaos and you're doing everything you can. And then I can problem solve with you because you want to be on time. You don't say, well, I'm not going to be on time on purpose. But if I didn't remember always consciously to add that step, which is what's getting in the way of you coming on time, you might say, you know what, I just need to get my act together. Okay, that's fine. That might be the answer, but at least I gave you the opportunity because it was this paint by numbers 6-step thing to make sure I always remember to ask what the obstacles are. There's a uh, there's a fascinating framework which I discovered after I read the book. Otherwise, it would be all over the book, which is the 4 levels of learning. I don't know if you've heard this or not. It was actually created. I think the guy created it. It was at New York University sometime in the 1960s or 70s, a long time ago. Anyway, it goes like this. Is it okay if I describe this,
Please,
Eric? Okay, great. Okay,
100%. Thank
okay,
you.
great. So I get really excited about these 4 levels of
I
learning
love
because
it.
okay, so it starts with so let's just use a really easy example, meetings. Okay, we all kind of know that meetings go too long, that et cetera, et cetera. We don't get okay. So the first step is unconscious incompetence, which
Yes.
means I'm not doing it right, and I don't know that I'm not doing it right. So maybe it's like we've always done it this way, or something like that, or or we'll use feedback. You know, I'm giving feedback, and I'm doing it poorly, and I seems like it's the right way to do it. The next level of learning is conscious incompetence, which is like, you know what I'm doing is not working. I don't know the answer, but I know that what I'm doing is not working. So that's conscious incompetence. The next level is conscious incompetence. Or excuse me, that's conscious incompetence. The next level then is conscious competence. Okay.
Yep.
And this is where there's a fork in the road between great people and okay people in terms of effectiveness. Conscious conscious competence means that I now know how to do it and I'm prepared to do it the right way, even though it's harder, but I have to think about it. So let's pick a really good, easy example, learning to drive. Okay. You're in the car and you're like, where do I put my hands and where's the pedal? And oh my God, it's turning red. And do I turn light? Do I slow down? The car's getting too close. All this is conscious competence. Okay. You're doing it right. You're driving. You're not hitting anybody, but you have to be thinking about it all the time. And it's exhausting and it's tiring and it's hard work. Okay. A lot of people then revert back, whether it's running a meeting or giving feedback or whatever. This is just too hard. But what they
Yeah.
don't understand is there's a fourth place, okay, which is unconscious competence, which means it just happens naturally, like the way you drive a car. You don't get in a car and all those things you thought about when you were learning to drive a car, you don't think about it anymore because it's unconscious competence. The same thing is true when you're giving someone who works for you feedback. I've used these 6 parts so much for so many years that I don't even think about it. It just, I can't imagine giving feedback and not asking somebody, are there any obstacles getting in the way? The way we run meetings, the way that Sheryl Sandberg at Facebook ran meetings or Jeff Bezos at Apple runs meetings, very different, very structured. It takes a little bit of work to do it, and so we adopted it in our investment firm because I got an investment firm as well. I can't imagine us running a meeting not that way. We don't even have to think about it. There's only one way to run a meeting, and and what I see over and over again is people like they kind of go like up to conscious competence, and then it's kind of like work and hard and tiring and whatever, and then they just revert back down to conscious incompetence. I'm just going to go do it the bad way, the wrong way. I'm going to hire the wrong way. And then the great people, they go, I'm going to push through this. And if I keep doing this will eventually be habit and I won't have to think about it. And then it becomes
Right.
conscious. Sorry, that was a little bit of a long story, but it's such
No,
incredibly powerful concept.
I think that it would be amazing if you can also then anchor this, because I think it's actually super important. And if you can anchor this into, especially for people that haven't read the book, is like now integrating that into the way that you would run a meeting inside of the investment firm. I think this is just a great way to illustrate this conscious or unconscious competence, because it's so easy. It comes out of you. It's just ease and flow. What would that look like for somebody that is listening right now and say, Dave, I'm hearing you. It makes sense. Now, because so many people, you know how they get stuck in the how, right? So can you give us a little bit of an insight for anyone that might be curious and listening?
Yeah. And in fact, I just did a training video. I'm putting together a training series to go along with the manager's handbook.
Beautiful.
I was just working on it yesterday. So the meeting thing is really easy. So I won't include all of the elements, but I'll include enough of it, most of it, to make the point.
Right.
You set the meeting time. Don't default to 30 and 60 minutes. Figure out how many minutes you need for the meeting. Maybe it's 20 minutes. So you set the right meeting time. Attendees who are going to actively be engaged. So with Zoom and everything, it's so easy to add attendees. So it's picking the right time and the attendees. Then when you have the meeting, you always start with this one simple thing. You state, this is the problem I'm trying to solve, or the opportunity we're trying to take advantage of. So you never start a meeting without saying what it is, what the purpose of the meeting is. The next thing you do is you go around the room calling on each person for clarifying questions, okay? Because you've sent a little background memo in advance. And the idea is we're not going to start the discussion until everybody's clear on what the facts are. So you don't dive into the conversation, but you might say, David, I was a little confused because here you said it was 14% up and down here you said it was 17% up, which is I'm confused. I reconcile that. So we have one set of facts. You just go around very quickly. Then you open it up for discussion. And you make sure that everyone had a chance to talk, because you don't know what voices, what great ideas are in someone's head. Maybe they're a little bit shy to talk about.
Yep.
And then at the end, you ask people for their conclusion on the purpose of the meeting in reverse order of seniority, because you don't want the senior person to go first, because then everybody's going to go, oh, I guess that's the right answer, right? If you go in
Great
reverse
idea.
seniority, it's a simple thing to do. Anybody can implement it. You'll have better decision making. The most senior person still gets to decide, but they get the benefit of the genuine thoughts of the junior people as well. And then at the end, you say, all right, I'm going to summarize the meeting. You're not restating the meeting. You're just summarizing. This is what we decided. This is who is going to do. This is what we decided. This is what needs to happen. This is who's going to do it by when. And then you follow up with a quick email blast with those 4 things. That usually it's not more than 6 or 7 sentences, quick sentences. That's it. I'm telling you, you do that and you will be in the top 1% of meetings. And after you do it for a while, you're like, oh, wait a minute, yeah, clarifying questions. It's like learning to drive the car. You're going to have to think about it consciously. People are going to want to revert to the lazy way, etc. But after you do it for a month or so, you'll never go back, because you'll go, wow, we got 2 hours worth of work done in 40 minutes. And our company or our organization is now moving 70 miles an hour, and it used to be moving 17 miles an hour. And nobody has to think about it.
This is one of the things that I find too, is like getting the action steps out of the organization so fast inside of these meetings, because you're not only asking the questions, you're getting everybody comfortable, you're emphasizing the importance of listening and to each person, so that people are also then recognizing that it's not about one person talking and there's not a boss there. It's just like everyone is co-leading. And so I love this because it gives such clear action items that each person that's sitting at the table is really clear by the end of this what they need to do, and then kind of disperse, and it goes out into action. So is this a real key indicator of the way that you are able to delegate for anybody that is really this owner versus an operator? And also, this type of delegation creates partnerships with other major organizations to then be able to move as a bigger organism, because, just because, you're company A and I'm company B, but we have a shared mission, our partners at the top, we can really work to understand each other so that our organizations can move towards one shared purpose by having these types of meetings. So take us through that a little bit, because I imagine that that's a huge part of the delegating process, or the leveraging process, if you
Yeah.
will, of serving one another towards a collaborative mission.
Yeah. Eric, I wish I'd talked to you before I finished the book, because you're bringing up a really important point that didn't occur to me until after the book was written. And the story goes like this. I'm riding in the van. I'm on vacation with some other people. And the guy I'm sitting next to, we're talking, the book had just come out. Guy runs a really, really large national real estate firm. And he was very interested in the content of the book. And he said, so what organizations embrace all of these 5 skills? And I thought about it. I thought, you know what? I was so focused on individuals.
Hmm.
And, I was able to come up with examples, but I realized that just because we were talking about it, I'll use the same example. Jeff Bezos uh, wanted to run meetings a certain way at Amazon, but he recognized that who cares if he runs it a certain way? The leverage, to use the term that you just referred to, Eric, is if he could get all Amazon meetings to run a certain way. And that's what Jeremy, this friend of mine, was asking me. He's saying, what organizations do this organization wide? And I realized that the piece that I had missed when I wrote the book was that the power is not that the CEO does it or the VP of sales does it for the sales organization, but that it becomes organization wide. And
Yes.
by the way, Eric, when you do make it organization wide, all this stuff gets easy too. So what I've said on the meeting thing, I know we keep talking about the meetings, but it's easy to keep building off it, is I'll tell people um, to punch through to that unconscious competence. This is all you need to ask your team. Say, we are going to do this for 100 days. We're going to just swallow the manager's handbook, hook, line, and sinker on how to run a meeting for 100 days. After 100 days, then we'll talk about it. We'll debrief. Do we want to keep things, get rid of things? So everybody feels like they have agency. But first, you have to try this and experiment with it. Because I know that by the time you get to the 100th day, most of the people in the organization will be in the unconscious competence mode. And they'll be like, oh, yeah, that's right. We were supposed to talk about this stuff. Yeah, that's right. Well, no, it's fine. Like, I don't even have to think about it anymore. And that so that was the first part of your question. And the second part of your question was, what about, brother and sister organizations, if you will, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I hadn't really, it's a really fascinating question, Eric, because I hadn't really thought about uh, to what extent does this go outside of sort of the walls of your own organization? I mean, obviously, if you're a high performing organization, you're going to give better customer service, et cetera, et cetera. You're going to be a more trustworthy vendor, or you're going to be a more trustworthy customer to your vendors. But I hadn't really thought about it in terms of branching out. So I have to think about that. By the way, this is what's really fun for me to talk about this, is that, you've given me something now to reflect on and think about.
Well, I think that's the grace, right? Of really using that curiosity, because I believe that the more that we recognize how the organizations as a whole could fit in with one another, then we could have a shared responsibility towards creating a meaningful approach towards the mission that we're all sharing as a result. Because, you know, for me, everything is meaning. Everything has meaning. Everything is like, how can we create more meaning? And fundamentally, if we move together in a more collaborative approach, I always say spirit and purpose will collaborate, like pride and ego will compete. And
Hmm.
I find that the most important thing is about figuring out a solution, because if we're really solution oriented on an organizational level, I'm not looking at a competition. I'm saying, oh my goodness, how can we help each other? How can we serve each other? How can we, because then by coming together, we can actually build stronger and move more into a different level of approach. And so I think that this is something that changes the game, because ultimately the greatest part of capital and time and resources are people. Like I find that that's the real wealth in any organization is the people and the wisdom that they all bring. So fundamentally, we get to move with that level of responsibility or ability to respond in a way that's bridging and taking more of an approach to leaving, the people, the places, the environments, the relationships better than when we found them. And that
Yeah.
is that comes from that, deeper wisdom that I always get more curious about, because we're all part of something greater than ourselves. And so
Well, so much,
I'd
so
love
much.
to.
I just want to say, just before you get to the question, because my mind
Yeah,
is racing. What you're saying,
I love it.
so much of running something, getting things done, moving an organization forward, is this issue of communication and interpersonal relationships. And I'd said earlier that one of the things you talk about when you give feedback, right, is what obstacles are you facing? Okay. Well, that's also how you treat each other.
Yeah.
There's a chapter on letting people go, and it opens up by saying, you brand yourself, you define your organization so powerfully by how you treat people when it's not a good fit. And you do it humanely and you do it kindly. And people go, yeah, okay, you're right. That does define it. And it's not it, and then I just say, okay, well, here's how you let somebody go in a kind way. And most people, by the way, don't do it. They do it in an indirect way, which is inadvertently unkind. Same thing, for example, with giving feedback, for example. And I'd like to think that those two notions about, communication and how we treat one another is throughout the whole book. And there, yes, we can all point to an example of jerks out there who have somehow been successful. I mean, sometimes the bad guys win. Okay. But most of the managers and most of the people that have built organizations do so with a team that says, I will walk through brick walls for you. And yeah, I like it. You're cheering. That's great. I start each class with an obituary of someone, and some of them are famous people, and some of them are obscure people that had really interesting lessons in their life. But one of the people that I talk about is Colin Powell, who was chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Secretary of State. Oops, sorry about that spin there. Um, and one of the things that I heard over and over again when I was reading about what people said about him afterwards is that people would walk through walls for him, brick walls for him. And he was voted the most popular man in America. Uh, and you think about it, this man was able to achieve all of these wonderful things, all these great things and greatness, and then become the most popular figure in America. And by the way, he came from very, very humble means. His mom was a seamstress. Um, his dad worked in the warehouse, um, because people wanted to follow him. And that's about people management.
Everything, which is everything. Compassionate leadership is what I'm hearing, by the way. It's like there's having this like ability to be compassionate, ability to hear people. And I think, ultimately the greatest leaders, from what my observation is like they're willing to listen, and they know that people are doing the best that they can. And as a result, they move forward and are able to corral people to move towards one meaningful cause. And that's what I'm obsessed about. And I love, because the manager's handbook really brings that onus of making sure that our time, like I love that, this fanatical custodian of time is really how we choose to operate. And it's not just like business or meetings, it's our life. It's our life, and so if we choose to really utilize our life with this meaningful approach that emphasizes a greater whole and taking responsibility for every moment, that we choose to live here, then we step into that really greater essence. And so I want to really ask these few questions from a couple people from the book club, if you don't mind, if that's okay. You know, Aline, Aline from the book club, she says, in your book, you discuss various tools and strategies for effective management. With the rapid evolution of technology and constant changes in the business world, do you think the management principles you teach should change? Or will they remain the same despite these technological shifts? If they do need to change, in which specific area do you think this will be most important?
I think that, well, one of the surprising things when I was researching this book is how many of the fundamental principles that are used today were unearthed many, many years ago. So I talked about those levels of learning, which, when you and I were talking about it, you were kind of lighting up a little bit. I mean, I could tell it was like resonating with you. And that's okay. That's a 50-year-old, 40-year-old concept. No, 50-year-old concept, 1970s. I talk about things that Peter Drucker, who was really popularized around the 1970s. So I actually think that in the scope of kind of like human evolution, I don't want to get like too out there, but we're talking about how like people come together to move an organization forward,
Right.
and we as people fundamentally are not very different than our parents and our grandparents and our great grandparents were. I mean, humans do not evolve that quickly. They evolve over tens of thousands of years, not generation. But the tools are improving, or well, in some cases improving. So what I mean by that is that asking someone what obstacles are getting in your way of you coming to work on time. Well, you know, that could be that same question could have been asked 500 years ago, right? And it'll still be important to ask 500 years from now. All right.
Mhm.
Or I could go down the list. So but the tools, the technology tools are things that are a little bit different. So for example, remote work. Okay, well, remote work is adding a new concept here, but it doesn't mean that what it means is you actually have to be more adherent to how you run a meeting, because everybody knows you go on Zoom and 2/3 of the people are checking their email and they're looking around. And the reason why they're not on camera is because they're doing something else. So those sort of fundamental principles of I'm going to call on everybody has to actively participate. It's even more important. Um,
Yes.
the connectivity that we have, the technological connectivity that we have, has been an incredible drain on our productivity. We
Mm.
think, oh my gosh, look at all this technology. It's made it worse, right? When we spend half our day just trying to slog through meaningless emails. So
Yeah.
so I want to say that technology can be a plus and it can be a negative, but underlying it, think about it like tools. But the foundation of how we operate and how you get people to be excited and how you move people forward are the same. Do you think that mistreating somebody today is any more or less damaging than mistreating them in your parents' age or your kids' age? You just don't do that if you want to move people forward.
This is
So,
brilliant. I really want to highlight what I'm hearing because I think it's this is culture is everything. It really comes down to the people and the culture. And this is what I'm hearing. The way that you're able to now bring this all together doesn't mean it doesn't matter about the tools or like it's people. It's serving the person. And I love that you're totally I could feel it in the buying in of that is like this is the most important part. It doesn't matter if it was 500 years ago or 500 years forward. Ultimately, it's the people.
yeah.
I love it. So that last question, my apologies, Aline. Or Manouche. It's from Manouche.
Uh-huh.
So my apologies. So this next one is from Julia. Julia, how have readers and managers responded to the book so far? Have you have any insights or feedback from your readers influenced how you think about management? And then a follow-up to that question is, are you considering writing another book or continuing to explore specific aspects of management in future works? If so, what topics are you most interested in tackling next?
And who's that question from again?
Julia, Julia.
All right. So to Julia's question, I do get feedback from the book. I wish I got more feedback from the book because as an author, you're dying. You'd like actually every reader to come back and tell you what they liked and what they didn't like. But the positive, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to honor Julia's question. I'm going to tell her something that I hear that's positive and something that I hear that's negative. Okay. The positive part of the book is that it's really, really practical. They read it and they go, okay, I can do this. You've brought it to a level of like paint by numbers that I can do. I love that. And there's no other book out there that does that, I think, than the Manager's Handbook. The deficiency in the book, which is what I'm working on, which will go to Julia's second part, Julia's question, is how do you implement it organization wide? I talked about the 100 days for the meetings, but what I didn't do is I didn't say, because I hadn't thought about it, implementing it organization wide. How do you push this down throughout your whole organization? So that's what I'm working on, Julia. That's what I'm working on now. And that's why, I mentioned to Eric a minute ago that I was working on these videos, and the videos on meetings are basically, how do you implement it across the organization? So that's what I'm working on, whether that is a book or whether that's a supplement to the existing book and fills out the website. We'll have to see. I just have to figure out the most effective way to do it. I'm not trying to stack books on the bookshelf. What I really want to do is I want to help people have the tools so they can get where they want to be, whether that's online, video, books, I don't care.
I love it. And I'm curious to know, like, how as a community or how as, leaders that are out there, how could we support you in any way, shape, or form, Dave? Is there anything that we can do or that you need from us so that we can reach out and maybe gather some information to support you in any way, shape, or form?
That's an interesting question. I'm going to answer it in a way that at first is going to sound like I'm being flip, and then I'll explain it. The answer is buy the book. Okay. Now that could be, oh, he just wants to sell books. That's not why I said buy the book. I said buy the book because I really, really believe this stuff. Like, I know that it will change people's lives and change organizations. And so all I care about is people get the material, borrow the book. I don't care. I'm not trying to sell books. I want it read, and then I want it implemented. And if people have feedback from me on how barriers that roadblocks or barriers or whatever, or success stories on how they were able to implement it throughout their organization, I have such an enormous appetite for that.
I love it. I love it. And I'm so grateful that you actually bring that up. So if there's a way that people can find out more information or find the book, where's the best place to find out more about you and the book? If anybody who is listening right now.
LinkedIn.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I try to post things regularly. And as I get this video series out, I'm going to push it through LinkedIn. So that's the best way. And that's where I put most of my attention around.
Amazing. So Dave, I just want to really acknowledge your brilliance and your wisdom and your time. Thank you so much for taking it when bringing, this amount of knowledge and emphasis. I'm curious, I have one final question for you. If you had 3 days left to live, what would you do?
I would do two things. I would write down stories of my life for my kids and grandkids, and I would spend time with my kids and grandkids.
Amazing. Family is everything.
My parents died early, and one of the things that I wish more than anything is that all of their stories didn't die with them. So that's what I would do. Easy question.
Easy, 100%, 100%. Easy. Thank you so much, Dave. I'm really grateful for your time. Is there anything else that you want to share? Any final statements that you want to give?
Just thank you. I just really enjoyed the hour. I can't believe we blew through an hour that fast. So just thank you.
Hey, everyone, and thank you so much for listening to The Resilient Minds. I hope you enjoyed the show. Please make sure to go comment and like and follow us on iTunes or Spotify. And please make sure that if you really love this, to share this episode. And make sure that you're inviting all your friends to like it as we continue to unfold what the beauty of our minds does. More importantly, how powerful our heart level of intelligence can be when we combine our heart and our brain together. And more importantly, make sure you take the time to take a look at what we're doing at Balanced Media Ventures and how we can actually really support you in doubling your impact, your income, and your influence, and how you can bring your life's greatest vision into your purpose and create it from that level of reality. Talk to you soon.